Start recording. Okay. So what we're able to do is we've put all of our recordings up on the DASA channel on YouTube. So Swati, could you please put a copy of the URL for the YouTube channel into the chat so then everyone can go back and have a look at our previous workshops.
Okay.
Great.
Sure.
Thank you. Right, so we've got our RMD workshop, we've got our metadata set up here, and we've got our first code chunk that sets up the RMD markdown file, and we're going to install our libraries in this code chunk. Now, if you've already installed your packages, you only need to run the libraries here. Now, the reason why I'm running the libraries in this particular code chunk is because we've already got include equals false. And so then when we knit our file, the library information is not going to be included in the final document. Okay, so get rid of all of this other information. And we get started. If you can remember, we're going to insert a code chunk. We'll insert an R chunk. And so we're going to use, put all of our coding in the pale grey section in between the 3 backticks. We're going to read in the data set. Schema, yes, I think you should install the schema package. Adam, so let's do that one. Library schema. And let's run this. Okay, running all of that. Now, Adam, have you...
Sorry, Amanda, I'm getting an error saying install packages object schema not found.
Is that in relation to install packages or just library?
That's installing the package.
Okay.
I'll try with the bunny ears.
I got the same error too, actually.
Install.packages schema. Did you put quotation marks?
I'm trying that now. I've not got the error, so yeah,
okay, so we'll restart R. Okay, so
it's all in the quotation marks.
It's fantastic. I'm really pleased to hear that. Yeah, it's a little bit funny when you have the you've got to remember the quotation marks for installing the packages, but the libraries don't need them. So I think there would have been a little bit more consistency if we could have just had quotation marks in the libraries as well. Okay, so we'll move on down to this the next set, and we're going to read our data set into the into our line. Now I'm going to put this code into the chat because you do not want to be typing this out. If you do type it out, you are going to make a mistake. Okay, so here we go. Now what this is doing is actually using the read_CSV function to read the data set from the GitHub repository, from the Tidy Tuesday GitHub repository. Now, when we run this, so this is the reason why I was putting it into the previous one. Let's go include equals false here. Now, do we? Yeah, we do have to put a comma. Okay. So this has actually read all of the information in here. We really don't need that. So let's close that down. Okay, so now we've found that we're reading that data set, that CSV file, into the object called plastics. Now, if we view that plastics, we get a bit of a look at what our data is and what we're looking, what we've got to work with. So we've got 14 variables, which remember are the columns, and over 13,000 observations. But as you can see here, there's quite a lot of zeros. Now that may or may not be a good thing. So we're actually going to leave them. Now, one of the things that we do need to consider is that there are some functions that you can use that when you're importing your CSV file, you can actually state that your NAs are replaced with zeros. I'd actually advise you not to do that unless you really, really know and you're 100% confident that your NAs should actually be zeros. Because when we look at this particular data set, there are some NAs that actually may be valuable. All right. So what we've got, we've got some errors, we've got some parent companies, we've got some different languages. So we really need to understand how we're going to use this data. Okay, so we've got year, country, sort of doesn't give us much of an idea about what's going on. So let's skim it. So, and this is where we skim plastics. This is one of the things I really like about working in the RMD files. It does actually give us a nicer presentation of the output rather than just working in the console. Okay, so we have 14 columns, 2 are characters and 12 are numerics. And there's no missing data in the country or parent company, although we have found that some of them are in different languages. And we've got quite a number of unique variables. And these are our numeric variables. We've got quite a lot of missing, although they may just be zeros. I don't know what this O is here. So looks like we've got some descriptions of HDPE, which is a type of plastic, high density polyethylene or low density polyethylene, PET. Yeah, so numbers of volunteers, number of events. Okay. All right, cool. So let's get into some analysis. Now, from our data dictionary, this data column here is O, actually says category marked other count. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename that that column in that data set. I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm going to rename that data set, that column, sorry, as other. So let's set this up here. Okay.
Amanda, slightly off topic. Can I just ask, just hopefully quickly,
Yeah.
why are you documenting in the Markdown rather than the R script?
One of the reasons why I like Markdown, especially when we're going to be doing some visualizations, is that we can actually look at our code chunk and our visualization together. So when we run this code, it will actually come out underneath this
Okay.
section here. So
Rather than in the console
that's
or the or in the other thing.
yeah, in the viewer section.
Yep.
Yeah, so it just sort of keeps it all organized for me, and so that we can
Okay.
you know, I can see how it's going to be presented. Okay, so we're going to rename plastics. So we're going to use a rename function. Plastics is our data set. And we're going to say other equals O. So what we're saying is rename column O with other. And if we run that line, you'll see here that it works. But if we go and view up here to plastics, it's actually not happening. It's still O. So what we need to do is to actually run this and save it again. So we're saying using the plastics data set, rename column 0 to other, and then save it again in that same data set. Basically overwrite it. So if we look at plastics now, we've renamed our column other. That just, you know, helps me out a little bit because it was going to get a bit confusing. Okay, now what is this empty column? Let's have a look at that and see what we can do with that. I tend to go on a bit of a journey through the data set. It's really interesting how I think that I'm going to be able to analyze something, and then I actually wander my way around somewhere else. So, you know, bear with me while we just wander through this through the plastics data set. And guess what? I actually found this really cool shortcut. So if we go Control-Shift-M, we can enter in our pipe function. So I actually, had to write down the Control-Shift-M shortcut.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Love a shortcut.
I was so tired of typing % and yeah, it was horrible. So Control-Shift-M. All right, so let's look at plastics. Let's group by. And we want to group by our country. And Control-Shift-M. And we want to count our empty columns. Let's run that one. See how it comes up really nice, a nice presentation. All right, so what we've got here, so we've got 148 rows. We're counting, some of these are empty, some of them are not. Some of them are zeros, ones, twos, some of them are not applicables. I don't understand what's going on here. So let's just have a look at the Australian, the data, so then I can understand a little bit more about what's going on. So, and because this data set's quite big, if we just take a subset of it, it just helps us sort of get our head around what the data is actually trying to say. So we're going to just call this Oz. And here's another new one. Alt minus gives you the assignment function. How's that? Alt minus. I had to write that down too.
It's getting even better, hey?
I know, right? Now I just need to work out where the keys are. Control-Shift-M. So we're going to assign this plastics. We're going to pipe it through with filter. country equals and double equal sign, remember that, and we need our quotes, Australia. So let's run that one. Okay, so we've now got our Oz, so we'll view Oz. And if I could type my brackets correctly, if there was a shortcut for that, I'll be fine. All right, so view Oz. Okay, so in Australia, what have we got here? We've got 71 entries. Okay, so what we're looking at is we've got 2 entries for the year 2019, Woolworths Group and Grand Total. And Grand Total is actually a company. I did search that one just to see if it wasn't a typo. And so it looks like we've got some null values. So it looks like some of these counts of rubbish that they found, or plastics that they found, have been categorized into each of these different groups of plastic. And so then we've got the number of events. So in Australia in 2019, there was one event that found that categorized 3 PET items, and they had 5 volunteers for that one event. So we've got our 2 companies. So in 2020, we had 9 events with 190 volunteers that found all of these items and assigned them to the companies. And so there's a couple of things here where you've got Johnson & Johnson or Johnson & Johnson, but I don't know if we're actually going to worry about those too much. So there's even though the data has been cleaned in Tidy Tuesday, there's still quite a little bit there's some modifications and cleaning that we need to do to this data set, depending on how our journey, on where our journey takes us and what we actually want to look for. Okay, so let's look at the countries. So now we've got a bit of an understanding about, what the data set's sort of looking at. Let's have a look at the countries. And just so then I can keep an understanding of what I'm doing. Countries. So remember, this is a text component, and because of the hashtag, it will come up as a heading title size 1 or a heading type 2, and we'll insert another code chunk. Okay, so we're going to count countries. And I'm just going to assign it to a data set, because remember, I do like to keep all of the steps sort of traceable in that exploration process. Or Control-Shift-M, and pipe it to group by year. And Control-Shift-M, and count country. And it's here. Okay, so what we've got in 2019, we have Australia that had two recordings, 2 line items. And in 2020, Australia has 69 recordings. So these are the events that the actual companies that have been assigned the rubbish events. Okay. So the United Arab Emirates has 1 in 2020, and there's an empty column for, or an empty observation for 2019 with 1346. So it looks like there was, out of all of these observations and total values, 1346 were not being able to assign to a particular company name or a particular country. And this is interesting too. Nigeria is in here, is the capitals there, and just standard one there, normal text. So now what we're going to do is use our count by country to actually look at the number of events. Okay, so what we've got here is, it says there's, in 2019 there was 52 individual events, and in 2020 there was 55 events. And considering that COVID was around in 2020, it's actually quite a good event, quite a good turnout for this particular organisation to be able to have people cleaning up their country. Now, there is something that we can do, something that I only just want to touch on at the moment, and this is a package called Janitor. And you may actually have to install this package. I've already got it. Remember your quotation marks. Janitor is a really good little package for cleaning data and reassigning names and things. But we're going to look at Janitor quite a bit in the future, not necessarily tonight. But while we've got this data set or this tibble for the year and number, Janitor is a really good one for being able to make tables. And so what we can do, count country, Control-Shift-M, and we make a table for the year. If I can type again, and run that one. And what this does is it actually starts creating the frequency distributions for the variables. So we have year 2019, 2020, n equals 52 and 55, and starts giving you a percentage. And there's a whole host of functions that you can actually add to the frequency tables, and we're going to look at that a little bit later, you know, in other workshops. But I just wanted to be able to show you the difference between the two, that we're actually, there's more than one function within R that can give you the same answer and have different purposes and functionalities within your data sets. Okay. Now, has anyone used ggplot before? Because we're actually, you know, it's nice to see the numbers, but the thing that I really like about R is the fact that we can actually start visualizing our data. So we're going to use ggplot, and we're going to plot our data set. So count country. Now with ggplot, you actually, ggplot is short for grammar of graphics, which is a really elegant way of putting it. And there's a whole website and books out about using the grammar of graphics and how the layers of the plots are actually built up. But they all start with the aesthetics. So the terminology is AES. Now we are going to use N because we use the count function. So we're actually going to plot this section here. So we're using x equals, so our x-axis is our count. And we're going to plot our country. And just making sure I've got all of the correct numbers of brackets. And we're going to add. Now in ggplot, you're adding layers, so you have to use the plus sign. You cannot just, you don't pipe when you're adding the layers. And we're going to use G on point. Which is about creating a scatter plot, basically, using just points. We're going to run this. And I'm just showing you a quick visualization of our data set. And we can do things like changing the size of the text and you know, changing the scales and things like that. But I just want to show you how quick and easy it is, and just to get an understanding of what's going on. What I've got plotted here is Vietnam has one lot of N in here and one lot of N here. I really don't know what's going on, but we know that that we were plotting the year, so we're actually going to call this shape equals year. So we're adding another dimension to this plot. So we're going to run this one again. Let's try this, see how we go. Color equals year. A continuous variable cannot be mapped to a shape. Check this out. Okay. This is why I like this this data set. We really need to understand what our data is and how it's actually coordinated. So we have here, we now have in Vietnam, in 2020, we had this number of Ns, and in 2019, we had this number of Ns. So we can see the two, the differences between the data here. Except our scale over here is demonstrating that the year column is being treated as a number, as a continuous variable. So that's why we've got this really awkward scale here, even though when you look at our year columns, we only have 2019 or 2020. And that is why when we put shape equals year, we get an error. They're saying, yeah, we can't assign a shape to continuous variables. We actually need, and let's go back to our schema section. Let's just make sure that we understand what's going on. So if we skim plastics, so we have country and parent company are our characters, and our year column is actually now numeric. But we actually want to treat year as a factor. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say count country with the column year. So this is a data set and the column year, and we're going to assign it as factor. And the same thing again. $sign, yeah. Okay, so we're saying in the dataset count country, column year, make them all factors and assign it back to that dataset. So basically override it. So if we run that, skim count country, okay, so we have our characters, countries. So we have countries and factors are years. Skim variable character is a country, the year is a factor, and then we've just got our numerical ones. I'm probably not reading that right. Okay, Adam, I'm going to be really, really careful about how I answer your question, because an integer can be treated, is a number. But sometimes you have numbers that you actually want treated as factors, as categories. So say, for example, you have an ABN number or a business number. You actually don't want to be using that number. You want it as a title. You want it as a factor. You don't want to be doing any numerical evaluation, adding, subtracting, mutating, all that to that. You want the software to actually read it as a title or a factor, not necessarily as a number. So in our 2019-2020, they are actually the names of our years. They're the names of our variables. We don't want to use any manipulation. But having said that, you actually want to be able to keep them as you may want to, in some of your data analysis, do some calculation. There's a package called Lubridate where we can do various things like, adding years, subtracting years, and all of that sort of stuff. So you do want to keep the option of being able to have them as a calculatable element or a numerical element as well. So, it depends on the data set and what you're actually looking for and what you're trying to achieve, which then looks at, well, what questions are you trying to answer? Okay, so if we run this ggplot again, here we go. So now what we've got is it's recognizing the years as factors. So we can see here that we've got the 2020 is the triangle and 2019 is a circle. So I think that one is, well, it doesn't really matter. I was going to say, the Philippines, it looks like, there's quite a difference between the 2 years.
Hey, Amanda, I'm getting the same error as before. Is there any chance you could paste your code?
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'm not sure if I've missed something.
Now, what we can do as well, just so I can show you a little bit more about ggplot. I'm going to have color equals year. Now you see here that we've got the years are being identified as factors, and we've got the color. And so it's very easy to be able to change and modify a number of different factors within ggplot to address your the visualization and how you actually want to express your information. What we're doing at the moment is not necessarily looking at this visualization as a means of presenting information to our audience. We're using it as a means of being able to explore our data to be able to understand the relationships between some variables. Okay. And we will actually be running some future workshops using ggplot more in depth. So this is just a little bit of a teaser about what's to come. I want to look at some volunteers, because for me the volunteers in this is actually the the most interesting. I'm not really interested in the companies and the assignment of the rubbish to whichever company. All right. But we can certainly come back to that a little bit later if we want to, if we have time. All right, so let's insert another R chunk. We'll title this one Volunteers. So we want to look at our plastics data. Control-Shift-M. Group by country and year. And Control-Shift-M. I'm going to learn that by the end of the night. And we're going to look at this distinct function. Country, year, volunteers. And if I can spell distinct, that would be great. And we are going to assign this to the volunteers dataset. And that is Alt-. Okay. So if we have a look in our file, so let's have a look at our volunteers. So we have country, year, and the number of volunteers. And if we look at 2020, so we have Australia in there for 2020. We had 190 volunteers. And in 2019, we had 5 volunteers. So we got that information previously when we looked at our Oz data. So we sort of know that that is exactly what's happening. Now, the reason why I did distinct is that if you notice here in Australia in 2019, we have 2 lines or 2 observations that actually have the same details. So it's a number of events are in there. So in this one event, we had 5 volunteers that were assigning their data to the 2 parent companies. And so that is exactly the same for all of this. So this number of events 9 and volunteers 190, I'm actually assuming has actually found and assigned all of this rubbish to these particular companies. So because I don't want to total these because they're the same data and it's just breaking it down in a different way to look at different data sets. I only want to look at the volunteers and the number of events. So that's why I've actually gone back to look at distinct. So just making sure that you get only the one value and not duplicating your data or aggregating your data. So we can go volunteers. It'd help if I could get the correct coordination with all of this. So ggplot, and there's only one P in ggplot. Remember our aesthetics. We want to plot country. So when we look at our volunteers, we've got country, year, and the number of volunteers. So that's the total of volunteers in the events. So we're going to plot country and volunteers. So this is actually saying that this is going to be on the x-axis and that's on the y-axis. And we already know that we've got two factors. So color equals year. And we add the next layer, geom point, as a function. It's looking at our year again as a numerical value. It's reading our countries, but we have got no idea where they are. But volunteers, we're up to 30,000 volunteers in a clean up your country type event. And how cool is that? But we've got to fix this. We've got to sort this out. Okay. So we actually did that filtering, the factoring, but we only did the factoring on count country, not on the original data set called plastics. So when we factored the year, we actually factored on this one, not this one. When we did our analysis, we used plastics, not count country. So that is why this particular chart is recognizing our year as a numerical number, because by assigning it to count, by changing the factor in count country, we didn't actually impact plastics, which is not a bad thing, but it's just something that we need to be mindful of when we do this. So we could actually go back and change the factors in plastics, or we can change it in this one. So I'm going to change it in this one because I want to keep plastics as the basic original data set, so that any changes or mutations that I do, this is where it was, line 49. I'm going to copy this one down to here. Volunteers, plastics. So we've set that up. I'm going to put it in here. And I've got to change this to volunteers. And it has a year. Yep. One of the things that I really like with the data analysis is that any changes or mutations or that you make, that you don't make it in the original set unless you're really absolutely sure it has to happen. Because I like to have that traceability back to that original set, and so that you can understand what changes you've made. So if we run that line to now filter that And if we run this one again, we've now got it as a factor. So that works. Now, as you develop your methods of doing your data analysis, you'll actually find what works best for you. When you understand what your data set actually is and what you're working with, again, you'll be able to make those decisions. Okay, so we can really understand the years and everything now. And we can see that there's some variables here that have changed quite a bit, but we can't read the country. So let's put in another layer. And this is something that you're going to be really interested in, and it will be very, very useful. So we're going to flip our coordinates. Coord flip. So we've got our volunteers. We're setting up our aesthetics for country and volunteers, and we want to identify the color as the year. We're going to use a geom point because we're looking at categorical data, and we're now going to flip our coordinates. So if we run that one, that's going to be a little bit easier to read. Okay, so we've got our countries on the y-axis now, which is now still recognized as our x, but it's just we've flipped the coordinates so that we can actually read the columns. Oh, sorry, read the labels a little bit. And we've got our numbers of volunteers across the bottom, and our years, our legend on the side. Okay. Some people don't actually like that really grey background, so we can add in a theme. Let's call it theme white. And we'll run that one again. Again, there is just so many different variables that you can use in ggplot. We're only just skimming the surface. So we've taken out that grey background. Just by adding in additional layers, we can add in titles and x-axis names and various other things. We can change the colours if we want to. We can change the shapes and things. We'll get into that a little bit later in another workshop. Now, the question is, does Taiwan actually really have 30,000 volunteers? Because that is really astounding if that's the case. So if we can go Taiwan, Alt minus, volunteers, Control Shift M, filter, country is equal to Taiwan. And I'm not going to type this. I'm going to put this in the chat. Okay, so let's have a look at Taiwan. Taiwan has 31,318 volunteers in the year 2019. But unfortunately, Taiwan didn't have any volunteers in the year 2020 because that was about the time that COVID hit and they were struggling really badly with COVID. Now, if we look at our volunteers, you'll understand this data set is not a tidy data set. Swati, you're a champion. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
See, this is why we have a team of DASA people here. They're just, everyone's fantastic. Okay, So what we're going to do is we are going to tidy up our volunteers data set. So we're going to go volunteers by year. Alt minus. Volunteers. Control Shift M. Pivot wider. Hope you guys can remember this from last week. Pivot wider. Now we are going to get the names from the year and the values from volunteers. And let's run that one. And if we have a look at volunteers by year, we have our country and we have a single line item for each country. Yeah, so and we have the number of volunteers in 2019 and the number of volunteers in 2020. And you'll see that there's some NAs here. Now, I don't know if I actually want to replace them with zeros, because the NAs can actually be quite valuable. So you'll see here that Cameroon participated, they had 387 volunteers in 2019 and no volunteers in 2020. And there's quite a few situations there. So let's actually have a look at how we can use some of these NAs. Okay, so we want to have a look at, we want to call this country participants. No, not that one. Alt minus. We want to use our volunteers by year, and we want to pipe them to filter I should probably explain what I want to do here. I want to actually filter all of the countries that had NAs in a single year. So I want to filter is.na for 2019. Let's see if that works. This one doesn't actually work. There's no data in the table. And the reason why I think this doesn't work is because they're looking at 2019 and treating it not as the variable name. They're treating it as a value. So if I put this as in quotation marks, will that actually work? Now, if I look at country participants again, hasn't quite worked. Because what's happening is that R is not actually recognizing 2019 as the title of the heading. So what we need to do is actually rename it. And this is the text that we were using previously. So, and I'll put this into the chat. So we want to rename the column volunteers by year 2019 as year 2019. And similarly, we want to do that for 2020 as well. So this is that part about working out your titles and your headings, and let's just run this code. And so if we look at now volunteers by year, we have our headings year 2019 and year 2020. So we can now, even if, so we should now be able to write in here is year 2019. So if we look at country participants, so now we've got in 2019 all of our NAs. So we've actually used, so there's 17 rows here that did not participate in 2019 but did participate in 2020. Although Korea didn't participate in either one. So what we've been able to do here is actually use our filtering to be able to understand any change or variation between one year and the next year. So the NAs are actually quite valuable. Now, in this component, so we filter is not applicable, is NA for year 2019, or is NA for year 2020. Now this little or symbol is the one that's a shift and the key above the enter key. It's a shift backslash. It took me ages to work out where to find that one. Now if we run this one again, we now have 31 line items where we've got NAs in 2019 or in 2020. So we're actually excluding the countries that participated in both years. So we're looking at the change. Now, a practical example of this process is that if you are looking at sales data and you wanted to find out if someone was, or if a supplier or customer was ordering in 1 month versus the other, or which new customers did you have? You can work on dates, but you can also use your NA values to be able to assist with that. Okay, so we're going to use this I'm just checking the time. I've got to be a little bit careful of time. I'm going to do a little bit more work on this in relation to looking at the variation between the two, because I want to actually see what is the difference between the volunteers. Because here in Benin, or I'm probably pronounced it incorrectly, there's quite a difference between the number of volunteers in 2019 and 2020. Okay, so what we're going to do is actually use mutate. So we're going to go volunteers by year, Control-Shift-M. And we're going to mutate. Now, the mutate is a really, really valuable function when you're doing data analysis, because what it does is actually does the function, or does the calculation and adds it to the same data set and adds a new column. So we're going to call this column name or variable name difference, and equals to year 2020 minus year 2019. So we're going to look at the volunteers by year, and we're going to add a column that is called the difference. That is the number of volunteers in 2020 minus the number of volunteers in 2019. Now, if we look at volunteers by year, let's just run that one again. Okay, so what's happening here is because we piped it, it's doing the calculation down here. So we've got the tibble and we've got the information in the memory. We can work with this particular column, but it's not saved anywhere. So we'll call it volunteers difference. And Alt minus. And now we have the variable here. So in Argentina, we had a difference of between the years of minus 234. So they actually had more volunteers in 2019 and only 9 volunteers in 2020. So they actually lost 234 volunteers over that time. Now, what we've got here is in Bhutan, 5,300 volunteers in 2019. NAs, there was no value in 2020, so it's identifying as not applicable. So I actually want to change these values now from NAs. I want to change them to zeros. And I'm going to add these columns, add this into the chat. So the very easy way to do this is to use our variable names. So what we're doing is volunteers by year, column 2019 is NA. We want to assign them to 0. Assign zeros to those values. Geez, it's really difficult to actually get the correct names and terminologies and all that when you're talking about numbers. So let's just run these, and so then I can show you what I'm talking about. And if you've got any questions, let me know. Okay, so now what we need to do, once we've assigned those, let's run this again. So if I look at volunteers difference now, so if we look at volunteers by year, you can see that all of our NAs are now zeros for the purposes of the calculations. And so now we've got an actual difference here for each of the different countries. And yep, I will paste that into the chat. And I'll put the mutate one in there as well. Okay, There you go. All right. Now, the last couple of things that I want to do is to actually plot these. Because now that we know about ggplot, let's plot some results. And because we're coming up to time as well, I will copy and paste all of the information into the chat. Okay, so let's look at what we're doing. So we're using volunteers difference and we're arranging by difference. So we're ordering it from on the difference column. So we're arranging it by this column. So it should be in some sense of order. So we'll have ggplot. So we'll plot the difference. We'll reorder the country. And then we'll plot the points. And we're actually putting a title in. So this is the change in the number of volunteers from 2019 to 2020 by country. So what we've got is the change. So we've ordered by the difference. So we have minus. So remember Taiwan had 30,000 in 2019, but then nothing in 2020. So they actually have minus 30,000 here. That's why this scale is in this format. So this is a way in which the mutate column and the difference was calculated. So we're looking at the variance between the 2 years. So then you can see there's quite a lot of information and quite a lot of details. So this is actually, the scale's really not quite small enough to be able to see, you know, the minute details, but you can get an idea. And there was a few countries that actually increased their numbers of volunteers for the work. And so then we can do a similar thing if we add in another code chunk. We'll do a similar thing for the top 20. Okay, and I've put this into the chat as well. So what we're doing is arranging in descending order the difference. We only want to get the top 20, and so we're doing a GG plot of the GG like a scatter plot, and the title is Countries with an Increase in Volunteers from 2019 to 2020. Okay, and so then what we've got here, you can see Tunisia had an increase in volunteers. So did Australia. We've got the scale here of 1,000, 2,000. Tanzania and Nigeria had an amazing amount of increases in the volunteers for the time period that we're talking about. So I hope that gives you just some idea of how powerful these packages are, how easy it is to analyze some data, how valuable NAs can be. And is there any questions about any of the code or all of the features that we were discussing tonight?
Thanks, Amanda. It was a great session. I have a quick one. Hopefully Swati can be quick on the keys again. How do you change the title size?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Swati.
Thanks, Amanda.
Are you going to be able to change the title size? There is a code, and I didn't get it from the chat previously about how to change the size of the title, but and I think geom title is probably something along the lines of in here, if we type in the code GG title. See, one of the things that we're doing is in the very quick overviews in these introductory workshops is we're not giving you all of the different parameters and arguments in the functions. So we're just saying GG title, but when you do go into help, then you've got titles, waivers, captions, labels, and all of these other arguments that we can use to be able to change the way in which things look. And let's just check if Swati's found it. She's good. Thanks, Swati.
Brilliant, thank you.
Now I'm going to just drop that. Do we add that as a plus and then add it here? Let's just see if that works.
You can adjust the size. I don't know what exactly 5 point will come.
We'll make it 25 and see if it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be making any difference. Maybe if I think because of the scaling and the viewing, it's just not quite working.
Yeah.
Although it may also be in the parameters. So if we look at the help function here, it doesn't talk about scales for the text size. But one of the things that we will be doing is once we get over the initial introductory workshops, then we'll actually look at a lot more of the fine-tuning and the various arguments and parameters that can go with all of the different functions. When we talk about mutate, factoring, filtering, you know, there are many different ways in which we can actually present the data and write the code and to be able to change the look. And like if you just type in, say for example, we change geom and we just go geom, look at all of these different plots that are available to choose from. You know, it's just the variety and the options within this one single package is just absolutely you know, mind-blowing.
I think I found it, just a very quick Google. I'll paste it in the text. It's plot.title. So I think GG title is replacing the other one. So yeah, it's plot.title.
Did you?
I've put it in the chat.
Yeah, and is it a plus?
Yeah, that's right.
Plot. Yeah. We've got to be really careful too that all of the different Okay, so that's size 8. Let's make it size 20 just so we can see whether or not it actually changes. Ah, there you go. Well, one of the things about the packages is that because there's so many different people developing packages and changing things, there are so many different functions and themes and variations to a particular way in which you can do things. You know, we can actually get 10 different ways to do the filtering and get the same answer that that we've got in this sort of format. And so if one particular method doesn't work, Google it, look in the help, you know, and just play around with different functions, because there may be an update, or there may be a function that is that has been superseded, is no longer available, or there may be a completely new package that's actually out and about that people are using. You know, so it's just the opportunities and is endless to be able to do the work that you need to do. So I'd really like to thank you all for coming along and participating. It's really enjoyable. You know, I've really enjoyed doing this work, and we've actually got a really good surprise for you guys next week, because next week Swati is actually going to take us through a data set about modeling and using Tidy Models package. So I'm actually really excited to sit there and be the to actually learn along with you, because it doesn't matter how often you do any of these data sets, or what you actually how you know, whether you're a beginner or an expert, you always learn something new. Workshop 3. And so we'd love for you guys to provide us some feedback on things that you would actually like to learn and participate. Looking at, you know, are there any packages or functions or anything that you'd really like us to focus on, and so that we can set up a workshop for you. We will be using a workshop developing a workshop in the future for GitHub, and connecting RStudio to GitHub and actually using the version control component. We also have the recordings of the workshops in our DASA YouTube channel now, which is absolutely fantastic. I think Swati's put that link in the chat earlier on today, or if you could put that in there again, that'll be great.
Yes,
yeah. All right, excellent. Thank you. And so, as you can see, I've just knitted our RMD file, and see how cool that is, that we can actually just present all of that information. And of course, we can, you know, play around with that and order it and coordinate it and make it look more presentable. But the functions and the data analysis is what was really important. So if there's no other questions, then we'll finish up the workshop, and I really hope to connect with you guys on LinkedIn, hear from you on via email, leave your comments on our YouTube channel. So thank you guys for participating. It's been really great.
Thanks, Amanda. It's great. Can I ask one thing?
Yeah, sure.
Only for future, I guess. It's because this is an intro to the visualization, and you are going to do further workshops on the visualization to develop this.
Absolutely,
further?
Absolutely. We've got some amazing stuff planned. We are going to be able to use GG Animate to be able to do visualizations through time and actual animations and create GIFs. Also plotting for latitude and longitude and actually taking up maps. And there's a whole host of visualizations that that we're going to be able to work through. So it's actually really exciting. It's one of the things that I enjoy most about using R. It's about the variety that's available just with a few lines of code. And if you know ggplot, it's just a few extra things to be able to add through to get the animations and maps and all of that sort of stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So so check us out in the next few weeks. We'll get something happening, but we're going to just step into title models next week and learn a little bit about models.
Excellent.
All right. Excellent. So see you all next week.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.